The grand dining room of Mark's family home, despite its opulent decor, always gave me a suffocating feeling. The dark oak-paneled walls, the exquisitely carved mahogany dining set, and the massive crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling all exuded a sense of formality and power, but also a chilling coldness. I, Lena, had been married to Mark for 2 years, but I still felt like a guest, a stranger who had stumbled into a world of luxury where I didn't belong. Mark was my husband, but in his family's eyes, I was just a girl from a common background, a mismatched partner. My face was always hidden behind a smile, but in my heart, I had to face a painful truth. I was never truly considered a part of this family. Mrs. Eliza, my mother-in-law, entered the room, a self-satisfied and powerful smile on her face. She was always the center of attention, a powerful woman who not only controlled the family's finances, but also dictated every small detail of our lives. Behind her, a servant pushed a glistening silver cart laden with exquisite lacquered wooden boxes. Each box was meticulously carved with intricate flowing patterns and tied with a luxurious silk ribbon. "Everyone," Mrs. Eliza announced, her voice sweet yet carrying a hint of authority. "Today, I wanted to have a very special dinner. I personally prepared some surprise gifts for each member of the family." She paused, her sharp eyes scanning the room before settling on me. Her smile grew a little warmer, but I could sense a flicker of mockery in her gaze. "Especially for you, Lena." My heart skipped a beat. I knew that my mother-in-law's surprises were never just simple gifts. She always used them to assert her power and to remind me of my place in this family. I felt a wave of anxiety, but I forced myself to smile and said, "Thank you, Mother. That sounds lovely." Mrs. Eliza began distributing the boxes. "This one is for you, Mark." She handed my husband a turquoise box adorned with a gold ribbon. "The fine steak you love, I made sure the chef prepared it just for you, medium rare, just the way you like it." Mark happily opened the box, revealing a perfectly cooked steak, its outer crust seared and its inside tender and fragrant. "Oh, Mother, you know me so well," he said, his face beaming. "And this is for David, the grilled salmon. My boy doesn't like red meat, does he?" she said to David, Mark's younger brother, in a loving tone. David's box was a delicate pink, decorated with a clean white ribbon. David opened his box, and a beautifully presented piece of grilled salmon, with a crispy skin and garnished with fresh vegetables, was revealed. Finally, Mrs. Eliza picked up the last box and placed it in front of me. "And this is for you, Lena. I know you've been wanting to go on a diet to stay in shape lately, so I've prepared a special dish just for you." I personally gave the chef the instructions. She offered a warm smile, but a glint of mockery shone in her eyes. "I hope you'll like it." I looked at the box in front of me. It was also a lacquered wooden box, but it looked a bit worn and faded compared to the others. The ribbon tied around it was also frayed, and the color seemed muted. I could feel the clear difference. The other family members began to whisper and giggle. Mark, my husband, looked at me with a bewildered and slightly worried expression. "What is it, my love?" he whispered. I shook my head, saying nothing because I was all too familiar with my mother-in-law's games. Mrs. Eliza always wanted to show me that I was an outsider, a person who didn't belong here. A cold feeling ran down my spine. A hushed silence fell over the table, replaced a moment later by an eager, collective anticipation. It was a cruel, practiced silence, the kind reserved for a public spectacle. "Go on, everyone, open your surprises," Mrs. Eliza urged, her voice a little too cheerful, her smile a little too wide. She was savoring the moment, like a predator circling its prey. One by one, the crisp sound of ribbons being untied filled the air as the family members, with a shared excitement, lifted the lids of their exquisite lacquered boxes. A chorus of appreciative sighs and exclamations of delight erupted as the tantalizing aromas of gourmet food wafted through the room. Mark's steak was a perfectly seared, medium-rare masterpiece, the rich, buttery aroma of truffle oil filling the air as he cut into it. "Mother, this is incredible," he exclaimed, a boyish grin spreading across his face. "This is even better than the restaurant we went to last week." David, his younger brother, let out a satisfied hum as he took his first bite of the grilled salmon. It was a delicate, flaky piece of fish, its skin perfectly crispy, surrounded by a vibrant medley of roasted asparagus and cherry tomatoes. "The herbs are amazing, Mom," he said. "You must have gone to so much trouble." All eyes eventually landed on me. I was still just staring at my box, my heart pounding in my chest. The lid seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, and the frayed ribbon felt like a chain around my wrist. I knew what was inside. I could feel it in the cold, unyielding silence of the box itself. But I also knew I had no choice but to open it. This was their game, and I had to play my part. I felt the weight of their gaze, the silent expectation that I too would open my meal and join in the chorus of praise. But their eyes weren't full of anticipation, they were full of a cold, merciless amusement. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I slowly untied the ribbon. The lid lifted with a faint creak, and the sight inside made the blood drain from my face. A single, sad-looking piece of boiled chicken breast lay inside, pale and utterly devoid of seasoning. Next to it, a handful of limp, brown-edged iceberg lettuce lay in a puddle of watery liquid. The contrast between my meal and the lavish feasts in front of everyone else was staggering, and the silence in the room was now so thick it was suffocating. Then came the laughter. It started as a low, suppressed giggle from Claire, my sister-in-law, who was enjoying a lobster risotto from a similarly ornate box. She pointed at my pathetic meal and burst into loud, theatrical laughter. "Oh, my God! Is that a meal? It looks like it's already been eaten," she shrieked, tears of laughter streaming down her face. "That's not a diet meal, that's a punishment." My father-in-law, a man who usually maintained a stoic facade, let out a bark of laughter. "Eliza, you outdid yourself. I told you she was too much work to feed," he said, and the rest of the family joined in. The cruel jokes flew around the table like sharpened knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. Did she run out of money? Is she allergic to flavor? Mark, my husband, finally looked up, his face flushed with embarrassment, but he still said nothing to defend me. He made a weak attempt to quiet his family. "All right, everyone, that's enough. We're all here to have a good time." But his words were empty, and his eyes still darted away from mine, too ashamed to meet my gaze. He was more concerned with saving face than with his wife's humiliation. It was a betrayal more painful than any joke they could make. A cold, steely resolve hardened within me. The trembling in my hands ceased. This wasn't just a rude joke. This was a public act of humiliation, a clear message that I was worthless in their eyes. The laughter faded into a cold silence as I slowly lifted my gaze, a dangerous calmness in my eyes. I placed the lid back on my box, not with a defeated whimper, but with a deliberate, firm click. A heavy, oppressive silence followed my action. The laughter died, leaving behind only the uncomfortable quiet of a moment gone terribly wrong. The family members, who had been so quick to mock, now stared at me with a confused and cautious air. They were waiting for me to break, to cry, to run away from the table in shame. But I simply sat there, my expression unwavering. I slowly lifted my gaze, my eyes locking with Mrs. Eliza's. Her triumphant smile had vanished completely, replaced by a suspicious scowl. She was trying to read my expression, to find the weakness she so desperately craved, but there was nothing there to interpret. Just a cold, blank canvas of composure. I finally spoke, my voice low and steady, cutting through the tension like a shard of ice. "You're right, Mother," I began, the word mother sounding more like a title of an opponent than a term of endearment. "This is a very special meal, and you were so generous to prepare it yourself. But you see, I knew something was off." A tremor of unease ran through Mrs. Eliza. Her eyes narrowed. "I don't know what You're just being dramatic." "Am I?" My smile was thin and sharp. "When I walked into the kitchen this afternoon, I noticed you were personally supervising the chefs. I could smell the aroma of the steak and the salmon, but I also caught a faint, strange smell, like boiled meat. I saw you pointing at a specific box, and you made a face of disgust. I took a long, steady breath. I also know you, Mother. You're far too much of a perfectionist to leave a detail like this to chance. And you're a creature of habit. You always serve Mark his favorite steak and David his salmon. But you also always eat the vegetarian option yourself. You call it staying trim. A tremor of unease ran through Mrs. Eliza. Her expression was a mix of confusion and fear. She was starting to realize that I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was an observer. I had seen everything. I had listened to every word, every subtle hint. I had noticed every detail she had so carelessly overlooked. The family, caught in the middle, looked from me to my mother-in-law, their heads swiveling back and forth like they were watching a tennis match. They were no longer laughing. They were terrified. "What is your point, Lena?" Mrs. Eliza said, her voice strained, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her fork. My voice dropped to a near whisper, but it carried across the silent room like a thunderclap. My point is this. When I saw you leave the kitchen, I knew you had a surprise planned for me. And when you brought out the boxes, I saw the exact spot where you'd placed your vegetarian meal. It was the third box from the left, with the most pristine ribbon. I paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. I'd been watching you all evening, and when no one was looking, I simply switched the boxes. Your vegetarian meal for my special meal. A collective gasp went up from the family. Their eyes darted from the box in front of me to the box in front of Mrs. Eliza. The silence was deafening as they tried to process my words. A look of dawning horror spread across my mother-in-law's face as she looked down at the very box she had just eaten from. The one I had pointed out was hers. The one with the wilted lettuce and the sad-looking chicken tenders. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear, and a look of dawning horror spread across her face. The collective gasp from the family was a physical sound, a wave of stunned realization that washed over the dining room. Mrs. Eliza's face, usually a mask of calm superiority, was the one that had held her meal just moments ago and ripped the lid off. She was so desperate to prove me wrong, to find her own elegant vegetarian meal inside, that she didn't even notice the looks of dawning horror on her family's faces. The moment the lid opened, a collective gasp swept through the dining room. Inside, nestled on a bed of wilted lettuce, lay 3 pale, unseasoned chicken tenders. The same sad, pathetic meal she had so meticulously planned for me. The chicken breast was slightly moist from the sauce it had been cooked in, and the lettuce was brown-edged from being left out. The humiliation she had just inflicted was now staring her in the face. Claire, my sister-in-law, who had been so quick to laugh, stared with wide, disbelieving eyes. Her mouth, which had just been curled into a smug smile, was now agape. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and morbid fascination. A nervous giggle escaped her lips, quickly followed by a full-blown roar of laughter. "Oh my God, Mother! You ate the special meal! You have got to be kidding me!" she shrieked, pointing at the box, tears of laughter streaming down her face. The rest of the family, realizing what had happened, joined in. Their mockery, once directed at me, now mercilessly targeted Mrs. Eliza. They mirrored her earlier taunts with vicious glee. Did she run out of money? Is she allergic to flavor? I told you she was too much work to feed. The very words she had used to humiliate me were now being used against her, and the poetic justice was both terrifying and satisfying. Mrs. Eliza's face burned a furious shade of crimson. She slammed the lid shut, her eyes blazing with a mixture of shame and humiliation. "This is not what I ordered. This is a mistake. Lena, what have you done?" she screamed, her voice cracking with indignation. I remained perfectly still, my expression unwavering. "As I said, Mother, it's the little details that matter, and I'm a stickler for details." My calm voice was a sharp contrast to her hysterical outburst. The very people who had just been laughing at me were now laughing at her, delighting in the spectacle of her downfall. Her carefully constructed image of grace and control was shattering, piece by piece, right before their eyes. Mark, caught in the middle, finally spoke. "Mother, just calm down. We can order you something else." His words were weak, a futile attempt to appease both sides without offending either. But it was too late. Mrs. Eliza, her eyes filled with tears of rage and humiliation, looked at her son with a betrayed expression. She had always counted on his blind loyalty, but now he was useless. The matriarch of the family, the one who had always commanded respect and fear, now sat in silence, but in the hands of the woman she had tried so hard to crush. A heavy, awkward silence filled the room, replacing the chaotic outburst that had just taken place. Lena stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the marble floor, and the sound echoed like a final declaration. She looked down at Mrs. Eliza, whose face was stained with tears and smeared makeup. The matriarch's once impeccable composure had completely shattered, leaving a pitiful, broken woman in its wake. "You were right, Mother," Lena began, her voice calm and firm, devoid of any anger. "You did prepare something special for me tonight, but it wasn't a meal. It was a lesson." She turned her gaze to her husband and his family, who were all staring at her with a mix of shock, disbelief, and dawning fear. This entire evening wasn't about the food. It was about respect. You wanted to remind me of my place, to show me that in your eyes I am nothing more than a few stale leftovers. You thought it would make me feel small, but it only showed me how small all of you are. You tried to build your superiority on my humiliation, but you forgot that a house built on sand cannot stand. Mrs. Eliza, now sobbing uncontrollably, reached for Lena's hand. "Lena, please. It was just a joke. I didn't mean it. We can get you something else. The chef can cook anything you want." Her voice was a jumbled mess of apologies and pleas. But Lena gently pulled her hand away. "It's too late for that. The real meal here tonight was a serving of cold, hard truth, and I'm afraid I've already had my fill." She looked at Mark, her husband, who was frozen in place, a picture of helplessness. "And you, Mark, you stood there and watched. You watched your family mock me, and you said nothing. You watched your mother serve me a dish of pure disrespect, and you were more concerned with avoiding a scene than defending your own wife. This isn't just about a meal, Mark. It's about a fundamental lack of respect. It's about a husband who failed to see his wife as an equal partner." Mark's eyes pleaded with her, a flicker of genuine panic in his gaze. "No, Lena, please don't say that. I love you. I'll make it right. I promise. We'll rebook our honeymoon, just us. I swear. I'll talk to my mother. Just, please don't leave." Lena shook her head slowly, a sad smile on her face. "I can't stay. I can't be a part of a family that treats me like this. You have to figure out what you want, Mark. You have to decide if you want to be a husband or a son. And until you figure that out, I can't be here." Without another word, she turned and walked away from the table, her head held high. The family watched in stunned silence as she disappeared down the hall. The dinner boxes sat on the table, a testament to a bitter act of cruelty and a swift, satisfying act of revenge. Mrs. Eliza was still sobbing. Sex Bowes 0.05. the weight of his inaction pressing down on him. The silence in the room was deafening, a fitting end to a meal of humiliation.